Hi.
My students were discussing your poetry this morning in
Oh
my
my.
Chicana lit class,
Uh-huh.
and they remarked we were talking about interlingualism, and
Mhm.
they remarked how in poems like Report from the Temple, you're very explicitly using both languages line by line. You're mixing them line by
Mhm.
line. In other poems, they're more distinct, like in Calculations, you have some Spanish stanzas, some English stanzas, and of course you have the puro Spanish poems and then the pure English poems. You have
Mhm.
a range in your interlingual techniques.
Mhm.
Does that follow any kind of pattern in your development? Was there a period where you were writing more of one way or another, or have you always kind of decided on a poem by poem basis? How has that worked for you?
I've decided on a poem by poem basis.
Mm-hmm.
I really have. I think as long as I've been writing, I've been using some Spanish,
Uh-huh.
but to what degree, whether the poem, like you say, within each line mixes
Uh-huh.
Spanish and English, or whether there's certain stanzas in Spanish or
Yeah.
all Spanish or no Spanish, really is dictated to me by the poem and what the poem is trying to do. So some of the poems where there's one stanza in English and another stanza in Spanish, those are conversational poems.
Uh-huh.
Perhaps there are, for example, like two distinct human speakers, dialogues,
Uh-huh.
right, who are speaking back and forth.
Mm.
And one of those speakers might be someone whose predominant language is Spanish,
Uh-huh.
and the other one might be someone whose predominant language is more English.
Uh-huh.
And so that reflects that.
Yeah.
Some of the poems aren't necessarily dialogues in the sense of one person talking to another, but there are multiple voices in
Mm-hmm.
the poem,
Mm-hmm.
and one voice, multiple voices, like there are multiple voices in our consciousness.
Uh-huh.
So one voice might be more in Spanish and the other one more in English.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes the kind of formal structure of the poem, like Report from the Temple of Confessions, is written in um, Old English alliterative verse, and I played with that a little bit. I mean, I took some license, but almost every line follows, that three alliterations per line,
Uh-huh.
the two hemistitches,
Uh-huh.
and so in there you find the Spanish and English mixed in almost every line. I think partly because I was getting as much mileage as I could out of alliterating between languages.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, that's one of the reasons I work interlingually.
Uh-huh.
It's not just to reflect that, this Spanish speaker would speak in Spanish, but it's also to play with language, because I think, that's a big part of what poetry is all about,
Yeah.
is how words rub up against each other. And we can get these beautiful alliterations and assonance and interlingual rhymes
Yeah.
by placing one language next to the other. So in that poem, that's what I'm doing.
Uh-huh.
And that poem is also very much about crossing borders. I
Uh-huh.
mean, the
Yeah.
the reason one of the reasons I chose to, write that particular poem in the
Mhm.
Old English is because the two hemistitches create this natural border
Uh-huh.
down the middle of the page.
That's right.
And I'm responding to an installation by Guillermo Gomez Peña in that piece that dealt very much with the notion of border. I mean, one of the things he had in that piece was a big body bag
Uh-huh.
that had INS painted across it. And so
Mhm.
he's very much dealing with the issues and problems on the border. And so I wanted the two languages to cross the
Cross
borders
the
of one
border.
another.
That's right. As you say, the form creates the border, but then the language is subverted by
Right.
crossing back and
And
forth.
I was
Yeah.
also trying to subvert Old English
Good.
by calling it Old Chicano English,
That's right. Good to reclaim it.
Yeah,
Reclaim it.
yeah.
Good. Another poem that my students remarked on was Our Language, and the line that stood out for one of my students, the couple of lines was on 38. We work in English, make love in
Mm.
Spanish. And that's such a beautiful and succinct way of capturing the kind of public private relationship between English in the public sphere and Spanish in the private sphere that so many individuals and so many families in the US experience. Um, I wondered m- what it was like for you, in your time in Pilsen. Was that split still present? Was English still the public language and Spanish the private language, or was there both in the public sphere in Pilsen? And
both in the
In
public
Chicago,
sphere,
uh-huh.
very much both in the public
Uh-huh.
sphere. My neighbors, for example, and when I say neighbors, I mean next door
Yeah.
neighbors, with whom I was very good friends. They were an elderly couple from Texas,
Uh-huh.
Tejanos, who always thought they were going back to Texas, and maybe someday they will be
Yeah.
able to get back there. They've been in Chicago for years and years, wanting to get back to Texas. But they were an elderly couple,
Uh-huh.
and we became very good friends. We used to help each other with so many things. They
Uh-huh.
helped me make a garden, and I would help them translate their Social Security documents
Yeah.
so they could understand them in English.
That's community right
Yeah,
there.
and I mean, they spoke primarily Spanish.
Uh-huh.
So in that public sphere, when we'd be out on the porches,
Uh-huh.
we would speak in Spanish or a little bit interlingually
Yeah.
in Spanglish. Even between that couple, an elderly couple, the man spoke more Spanglish and mixed more English in,
Uh-huh.
and the woman, his wife, spoke more puro español,
Uh-huh.
right? So, but that was more like Spanish in
Uh-huh.
the public sphere.
Uh-huh.
At the taquerias, at all the restaurants, it was Spanish in the public sphere.
Uh-huh.
At many of the stores, Spanish in the
Uh-huh.
public sphere. And then, excuse me, among younger people,
Uh-huh.
and that depended on the person too.
Yeah.
It wasn't just
Right.
divided by age, but among younger people, depending on the context, might have been more of a use of English.
Mhm.
But I think they were
Mhm.
both blended
Mhm.
all the time.
Uh-huh.
And the Mexican Fine Arts Center Museum is in that community, and I worked there and I worked
Uh-huh.
with youth. And really, the youth that I taught creative writing to, some of them wrote primarily in English, and some of them wrote primarily in Spanish.
Mm. And
Yeah.
how many years were you in Pilsen?
I was in Chicago, I think about 9 years,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't live in Pilsen for all of them,
Mhm.
but I think for about 6 years.
You mentioned, Mexican fine arts, your
Uh-huh.
work at Mexican Fine Arts Center, and we've had a number of conversations where you've mentioned your relationship to the visual arts and also to music, both being important. And of course, our hope is that when the reader looks at this book, she'll
Mhm.
look and she'll see, that these are a part of the book. They're not, an addendum. They're part of the whole. They're part of a continuum of arts.
Mhm.
Could you talk a little bit more about the? We can start with these in particular.
Mhm.
Talk about these. There are they woodcuts or lino cuts? I'm
They're
sorry, I don't
lino
remember.
cuts.
Yeah,
Mhm.
talk about why it was important to you to have these as part of the book, and then the larger question, how the arts are interrelated for you.
Mhm. Well, it was important to me to have them in the book because Pilsen is an interesting barrio. I mean, every barrio is interesting, but Pilsen has quite a few artists in it. And I don't only mean like a new wave of artists that come with gentrification.
Mhm.
That's there too, but I
Mhm.
mean Mexican American, Native American, uh, or Chicano artists who have been there for a long, long time, who grew up there,
Mhm.
who have done their work there, who have studios there, and not the fancy uppity studios, but I mean like studios in old falling down
Yeah.
buildings.
Right.
But that's where they paint and
Yeah.
where they work. And I was fortunate, very fortunate, to make very good friends with quite a few of those artists. And part of it was working in the museum,
Mhm.
right, and getting to know people
Mhm.
through that.
Mhm.
And so Jeff Abbey Maldonado, who did the prints in this book,
Mhm.
and I became friends, and we did other collaborations.
I see.
We did a calendar, and I wasn't the only poet. There were
Uh-huh.
6 poets,
Uh-huh.
and the poets all wrote a poem. Each wrote a poem, gave it to the artist Jeff. Jeff created a print to go with the poem
Mhm.
in response to the poem.
Mhm.
And then he gave us each a print, and we wrote a poem to respond to the print. And
Oh,
so there
okay.
ended up being 12 sets, and we did a calendar for the year 2000.
Uh-huh.
And then we did shows where he brought the prints and they were hung,
Uh-huh.
and we did a poetry reading, and there was a local band named Casolando at that time, and they did music, and we did these at major places like the Art Institute.
Uh-huh.
One was at the Art Institute, and one was at the, Chicago Cultural Center, so
Mhm.
they weren't just, like, in little bars, but
Right.
and one
Yeah,
of them
yeah.
was in a bar, and
Yeah.
that was probably the most fun, but, a couple of them were, in some pretty major places,
Yeah.
and so we had collaborated before, and so that was part of what was important. A couple of these, like the very first, print that he calls Edge of Vision, actually came from that, calendar series.
Oh, okay.
He gave me Edge of Vision, and I wrote Medicine
Oh,
in
okay.
response, only, it didn't look like this at that point. I've
Uh-huh.
taken it through many, many revisions.
Uh-huh.
So the way that Medicine looks in the calendar and the poem that it is very different, and it wasn't even called Medicine at
Okay.
that point, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But, yeah, so they to me, they're just meant to go together. They're
Yeah.
part and parcel of one
Yeah.
another,
Uh-huh.
and if you have an ekphrastic poem, a poem responding to another art form, and, I mean, the poem should be able to stand on its own.
Mhm.
It should be able to be read without having to look at the piece of art,
Mhm.
but, it's always nice to have the piece of art there to be
Right.
able to say, "Okay, this is the poem. This was the piece of art. How do they communicate to one another?"
Mhm. Mhm.
Now in other cases here, the art the piece of art doesn't go with a particular poem, or
Mhm.
I mean, I didn't write the poem in response to that piece of art
Mhm.
necessarily, but that piece of art to me, speaks to the book or the
Mhm.
collection in general, speaks
Mhm.
to some of uh, the issues and themes and ideas that I care about and that we see moving throughout the book.
Yeah.
So his print revolution, um, I didn't write Turning to go with revolution, but Turning is a poem about the revolution
Yes.
in Chiapas,
Right. The
right?
Zapatista
Hmm.
revolution.
And
Yeah.
so there's a way in which they just really speak to each
They
other.
do.
Mhm. Also because the artist is half, Mexican and half Native American,
Oh, I see.
and so there's a real, he's Alabama Cohasata, that's his
Mhm.
tribe, but he cares an awful lot about what's happening in Chiapas.
Uh-huh. You know, we have read this is the third literary reference to the 1997 massacre that we have read in this particular Chicana Lit class.
Mhm.
We have encountered it in Sylvia Torti's novel, The Scorpion's Tale. Actually, she writes more explicitly about the '94 New Year's Day uprising,
Mhm.
but sort of, the ghost of what's to come of the massacre
Mhm.
is embedded in that. And then Lorna has her poem Coffee, where she memorializes
Mhm.
the 45 with their names mentioned in them. Um, we talked yesterday about Juan Felipe and his
Mm.
whole entire collection, Thunder Weavers, devoted to the lives of some of the survivors of the Octal massacre. So it's coming to be a real central uh, touchstone for, I think, Chicano and Chicana literature, written in the '90s and in the early part of the new
Mhm.
millennium. This particular event is something that we keep coming back to and that we keep talking about. Could you tell us some more about writing this particular poem and referencing that event for you? What that meant for you?
Hmm. Um, you know, I think this poem, I mean, obviously it comes from the convergence of different events that were happening at that time, both
Mm.
personal and political
Uh
and
huh.
public.
Yeah.
So I was obviously
Uh
I
huh.
read about the massacres,
Yeah.
saw what happened on television,
Yeah.
was following what was happening at that time,
Uh huh.
and had got, was involved with groups of activists in Chicago who were having protests in Chicago,
Mhm.
right? And as the poem says,
Yeah.
in on 26th Street in
Right
La
on the loop.
Villita,
Uh-huh.
against what was the oppression of the people and the slaughtering of the people in Chiapas.
Mhm.
So I was going to all those protests and those marches and was involved in what was happening there and was following it, but from a distance from
Uh-huh.
here, right? I
Uh-huh.
wasn't
Right.
there. I
Right.
wasn't. But at the same time, there was someone very close to me in my life who uh, it was and is still the kind of activist who did what they call witness work.
Mm.
So he would go to Chiapas,
Mhm.
and before that, for 10 years, he did this work in Guatemala,
Mm.
and he worked almost like an unarmed bodyguard.
Hmm.
So he would accompaniment work, they call it
Uh-huh.
too.
Yeah, yeah.
He would live among families because he is an American. The idea was that he would live among families that had been threatened by the death squads, and he would accompany them when they had to go away from the home, so that
Mhm.
if they were shot at, he would be witness to it, or he might
Okay.
be shot at first,
Yeah.
okay? And so he had done this work all of his life. I mean, he was
Uh-huh.
really committed. He'd also done work where he had taken in undocumented refugees from El Salvador
Mhm.
into a co-op house
Mhm.
in Michigan. And this person was somebody I was very close to in my life. And
Mhm.
so he was in Chiapas at the time of this particular massacre.
Mhm.
And he would, as the poem says, the poem is pretty literal. I
Mhm.
mean, he was in the forest about
Mhm.
10 miles
Hmm.
from the massacre.
Mhm.
So I was also getting telephone calls from him
Uh-huh.
about what was going on there,
Wow.
and witnessed this man who had done this work all of his life,
Mhm.
who was toughened to
Mhm.
this, come back from witnessing that massacre.
Mm.
And after identifying many people in body bags
Mhm.
throughout his time doing this kind of
Yeah.
work, and really literally completely break down, close the world off.
Mm.
I mean, literally sit in the dark in a closed up house. Like, just, I mean, now he's back and doing the work.
Uh-huh.
But what I'm saying is that for a while, it was just like, I just can't.
Mhm.
He just couldn't move almost,
Hmm.
if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
Uh, and so that was going on. And
Uh-huh.
then at the same time, I had have an uncle who was dying of stomach cancer,
Uh-huh.
that all started from his time fighting in a war,
Mhm.
and getting such terrible stomach ulcers
Uh-huh.
that eventually he got stomach cancer, and he was also tormented by having fought in a war,
Mhm.
always the dreams in the middle of the night,
Mhm.
etc., etc. And so they had to cut out a big part of his stomach.
Mm.
And it struck me that some of the massacre, some pregnant women were massacred in Chiapas, and the babies were cut from their wombs. And then here was this person I'd loved all my life, one of my uncles, whose stomach was cut away, and to survive, he had to eat all the time,
Mm.
because you can only eat such tiny little bits
Mhm.
when you don't have a full
Yeah.
stomach, that you have to constantly eat but these teeny little morsels to
Mhm.
stay alive.
Mhm.
And then on the other hand, there were these women whose, had their stomachs cut away, and their children. um I mean, it's really difficult to even think
Mhm.
about or
Mhm.
talk about. But I guess for me, the poem ended up being about, my posing the question, what are the connections between, you know I mean, here I am, this person witnessing these things, um, as are so many of us, right? Witnessing these various things, some from very close, some from afar,
Yeah.
right? Um, doing, trying to comfort the people that I know on the personal level, the uncle, the activist, right?
Mhm.
Trying to do my part on a public level, with the protests, etc., against what was happening in Chiapas, and saying that there are these connections between these violences and these illnesses. Is
Mhm.
that making any
It
sense? I
does.
hope I'm not just rambling,
It does. It
but,
makes a lot of
uh,
sense.
I don't think we always think about how these, I mean, for me, it's kind of like these seemingly really disparate kind of things are not so disparate.
That's right. Well, that's the
Yeah,
part of the work of poetry,
right.
showing the
Mhm.
way your life and the life of, you know,
Right.
campesinos or,
Mhm.
indigenous activists in the south of Mexico are linked. Those
Right.
lives are linked. That's the work of poetry, I think. Um, did it, I'll ask specifically about turning and then more generally about your poetry. Um, as you were kind of braiding these threads or experiencing the braiding of these threads in
Mhm.
your life, um, did the sort of vision for this poem come to you all at once, or was it something you had to kind of work at, maybe trying it one way, trying it another way? And so the larger question is, do you feel like your poet? This is a sort of odd question, but you'll understand. You're a
Mhm.
poet to poet kind of question. Does a lot of your work for your poetry happen sort of before you start writing? Are you chewing on poems a lot in your head before you're writing them down? Or are you sort of shuffling them around once they're already written?
I'm doing both.
Uh-huh.
I gestate on poems a lot.
Mhm.
I
Before
sometimes,
writing.
before writing.
Okay. Mhm.
I have a poem. It's not in this book, that I don't feel like I'm still not done with, that
Mhm.
I've been writing for 10 years.
Uh-huh.
And for probably 7 years, I was writing it in my head.
Yeah.
And then for 3 years, I've been playing with it on the page.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
This particular poem, Turning, I gestated on a long
Mhm.
time, I think. I don't remember exactly how long, but
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah.
Then it was a very different when it came out on the page the first time.
Mm,
I cut pages out of this poem,
I see.
and this poem is still long.
It is. It's one of the longest poems in the
It's
book.
3 pages long, but it probably was 7 or 8 pages
Uh-huh.
long.
I see.
And I cut away and cut away
Yeah.
and cut away.
Huh.
And I think that for me, sometimes I have to build on, but more often I have to cut away.
Uh-huh.
Because the hardest thing for me about being a poet, about poetry,
Yeah.
is finding the structure for the poem.
Yes.
Because I don't think I naturally lean towards structure. And so my poems, when they're in a rough form, when they're not very good, when I don't want anyone to see them,
Yeah.
they're like so much water just spilling and gushing out everywhere. Okay. And then I have to figure out what is the container
Yeah.
for this water.
Right.
Okay. And I have to really struggle and work with finding
Uh-huh.
that.
Uh-huh. That
Uh,
your image sort of holds a paradox of poetry in it, the idea of shaping water.
yeah, that's true.
Any kind of shape that it takes is
Yeah.
gonna be sort of temporary and arbitrary anyway, which,
Yeah.
and then the reader picks it up and it sloshes a new direction
Right.
based on the reader's experience.
Or finding a vessel for it, or maybe crafting a vessel for it. Like,
Yes.
I'm very attracted to art forms, including pottery, and
Ah,
you know what I mean? Maybe
yeah.
it's that I have to find which kind of pot I'm gonna throw,
Uh-huh, good.
metaphorically, right?
Yeah, right.
For the water of
For
each
that
poem.
water, yeah, in
Yeah.
that case,
Mhm.
yeah. Um, we've also talked in my class about who's an insider and who's an outsider when they read your poetry,
Mhm.
obviously, people who can read Spanish and hear Spanish are the insiders. Those who can't are the outsiders, and that reverses
Mhm.
the current insider outsider status in the U.S. And I've heard you say that you're writing for an audience of the future when you write these interlingual poems.
Mhm.
Could you say a little bit more about that?
Um, well, I maybe that's just hope.
Yeah,
And we have to have some hope even at the end of turning. What's the last line? This
that's
hope
right.
that I try to force myself to swallow, or something to that
Well, let's read.
something to that
Yeah, the
extent.
hope that I force myself to
The hope
swallow.
that I force myself to swallow, even in the most hopeless of
Mhm.
situations. And so I do think we're moving toward becoming a bilingual nation.
Uh-huh.
I say that not meaning to be naive. I understand, and I'm fully aware of all the resistance to
Yeah.
that out there.
Right.
But I think you can't. I mean, up until a few months ago, I lived in Chicago. There are more than 1 million Mexicans in Chicago alone.
Uh-huh.
That's just one city.
Yeah.
It's not the biggest city,
Right.
right? It's not Los Angeles, and
Yeah.
we're only talking about Mexicanos there.
Uh-huh.
Then you've got Puerto Ricans and Dominicanos and Guatemaltecos and Nicaraguenses and
Yeah.
Panamanians, I don't think well, I don't know. I'm thinking about the present state of affairs with all the immigration issues. I was about to say
Oh,
I don't think those populations are going to get smaller.
yeah.
Um, I think there are powers that be that will try everything they can to make them smaller,
Uh-huh.
but I really don't think they're going to get smaller. And
No.
because these are immigrant populations that are constantly renewing and replenishing
Yeah.
themselves, there's
Yeah.
always new
Uh-huh.
immigrant. The language is going to stay. The people will bring the language with them, and even though they will try to learn English, and it's very much a lie
Mhm.
when we hear the powers that be
Yeah.
say they come here and they don't even want to learn English. That's not true.
That's
Obviously,
right.
we know
That's
that
right.
immigrants try very hard to learn English.
We
We don't have
know.
the resources out there to teach them the
Yeah.
English.
Yeah.
There are waiting lines 50 miles long to take an ESL class
That's
and
right.
etc. And so I think that it is the language of the future. And I think we will hear more and more. We hear it now.
Yes.
In any neighborhood where you have a Latino, community, you
Uh-huh.
hear this constant mix of Spanish and English.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes more Spanish, sometimes more English, sometimes, but you hear this. And so, and that's ancient.
Yeah.
That goes back to, cabeza de vaca,
Yeah. Right.
right?
It's ancient.
Like,
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, it's been here a long, long time.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So I really do think that maybe my audience, or an audience for these poems will grow
Mhm.
in time.
Mhm.
Right now, it's certainly not the easiest thing to do. I
Mhm.
mean, it's a lot harder to get work published
Mhm.
when you're writing interlingually.
Mm.
It scares the pants off of editors, not Momotombo Press,
Not us.
obviously, but you know, in the mainstream,
Yes.
you know, market. And it's not that I don't want to reach monolingual speakers in either language.
Mhm.
Um, I do, I really do,
Mhm.
but I think there's a lot of people doing that,
Yeah, sure.
and I also feel like I guess what I want to say to people is is open your minds a little bit. Just try it. If you're monolingual in either language,
Mhm.
right? Just try it. You know, pick a poem. If you're monolingual in English, pick one of the poems that that just has a little bit of Spanish in it,
Mhm.
and try it. Look up a few words. Go to the dictionary. It won't kill you.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Look a few things up. Ask somebody. There's plenty of people, you
Yeah,
know, that can tell you what it means
that's right.
if you have to know
Ask
what it
a
means.
neighbor.
Right. Or just listen to the rhythms and the music of language, because poetry is as much about music and the way one sound riffs off another as it is about a message
Yeah,
or as it is about meaning.
that's right.
So just, you know, let it go. I mean, there's been a lot of people throughout the history of American letters that have had French in their work or
Mhm.
German in their work,
Mhm.
or and we were certainly willing. People have certainly, they didn't shut the door on T.S. Eliot
Right, that's
because
right.
he put European languages in his
That's
work.
right.
And I'm not saying that I'm T.S. Eliot or that any. I'm not trying to make. I would never say that. But what I'm saying is, you know, why does it scare you so much just because it's Spanish?
That's right. That's right.
Right? It should scare you less, really,
Yeah.
because Spanish is pretty accessible out there
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
terms of figuring out what it means. You don't even need a dictionary. You can look it up on the web
That's
dictionary.
right. That's
You
right.
know.
There's
Mhm.
something powerful about the way that the experience of reading your poetry insists on the belonging of Spanish in
Mhm.
U.S. society. It belongs in your poetry as it belongs, as it should naturally be a part of U.S.
Mhm.
society. Um, your remark about, T.S. Eliot didn't get slammed for his
Yeah.
interlingual
Mhm.
efforts reminds me that I think Francisco shared with me that he had recently been asked the question, well, what are Latino authors adding that T.S. Eliot didn't already do? And I, yeah,
Oh.
and there's a lot of problems implicit in
Mm.
that question, and one of I think the easy answers is that insistence, that sort of reclaiming
Mhm.
of what belongs on this continent, and Spanish
Mhm.
is one of the languages that belong. Nahuatl is one of the languages that belong.
Mhm.
Indigenous languages belong. And your work does that. Your work puts it in that context of fitting right in with the mix,
Mhm.
which is something I really admire about it. You had said that sound is just as important as meaning for you, which is something that I think people who are new to poetry don't always understand, that sound is its own kind of sense beyond
Mhm.
just cognitive sense. Um, I'm guessing that some of that sensibility of yours comes from your history as a performance poet. You have a
Mhm.
long history of connecting poetry with performance, and of
Mhm.
course, then sound becomes more prominent instantly when poetry is performed. Could you look through the book and tell me which poems you think are more have more of an oral quality?
I would say for different reasons that like the abuelo y sus
Uh
cuentos,
huh.
because it's a dialogue
Uh huh.
between an abuelito and his little, you know, granddaughter.
Yeah.
And the way that they talk to each other and the way that they mix their Spanish and English,
Okay.
I think is pretty. That's a pretty oral poem.
Yes. Uh
Then,
huh.
you know, like the poema para los tintunteros,
Yes.
because again, it's about music.
Uh-huh.
It's a poem about drummers and for
Yeah.
drummers. And I really, when I wrote it, the ideas in it are very simple.
Uh-huh.
It's not a complex, layered poem in terms of, like, you know, layers and layers of metaphor. It's very simple ideas out on the page, just images of drummers keeping the rhythm in different ways. So really what was primary for me in that poem was the sounds,
Uh-huh.
the little internal rhymes
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah.
I also think the report from the Temple of Confessions,
Mhm.
and that's why I tend to read it at
Yes.
every single reading,
Yeah, yeah.
because again, the alliterations, all those alliterations in it,
Uh-huh.
and the mixing of Spanish and the rhythm of it.
Uh-huh.
The rhythm of it very much lends itself to
Yeah.
this orality
That's right.
and performance.
Uh-huh.
And those three poems are really different from one another.
That's
And yet I
true.
think they are all like that, and as well as the Sound Waves
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
series, I think, again, because these are poems that are about sound.
Yeah.
I meditated on certain sounds in the Spanish language
Uh-huh.
that were unique to the Spanish language.
Mm.
Like, obviously, every sound is unique,
Uh-huh.
but that, like, ñ, you don't have that sound in any
That's
other
right.
language.
Yeah.
R, you don't have that sound. And then I was interested in de
Uh-huh.
and ve
Uh-huh.
because of the way that if you're bilingual and you speak English too, you realize that those sounds in Spanish are in between two English sounds.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
sound, it's in between. Like in English, it's de, duh,
Uh-huh.
duh. It's that dental,
Uh-huh.
or the th, th,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
They.
then you get in Spanish de,
Uh-huh.
which is sort of in between.
Uh-huh.
And our ve can be more like a b, or it
Uh-huh.
can be more like a b.
Uh-huh.
And so it's that in betweenness. I'm always really interested in those
Mm.
issues
Mhm.
of in betweenness and borders colliding and hybridity.
Uh-huh.
And so I think I chose those two sounds
Uh-huh.
because of that quality that they
Uh-huh.
have.
Uh-huh.
Um,
They live in a border,
they
a
live in a
sound border.
yeah, but only like a monolingual Spanish speaker isn't going to think about that
Mhm.
because they're not going to, again, it's very much a poem, or very much poems that are much more accessible to
Pardon
somebody
me.
who is bilingual and might think about that,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Uh-huh.
You pointed to Tintunteros. Did you write the English version first or the Spanish
The
version first?
Spanish version.
Uh-huh.
I wrote that in Spanish. That poem came to me in Spanish.
Uh-huh.
And then I attempted to translate it, and it was okay. I don't like the English version as much because I think there were just certain things that
Yeah.
I did my best,
Give
and
me an example of where you
um
feel like the English version lets you down, but
uh
where you like what's present in the Spanish version.
okay, a really obvious example, like, in Spanish, you've got este para los congueros, los tamboristas, los bongoceros.
Mm.
And in English, this for the congueros, the drummers.
Mm. Drummers versus
Right.
tamboristas.
Yeah, the bongos, which is something I think I made up. I don't know if there really is a word. But let me find something that's more, oh, I think, yeah, like with the line with "Qué malas sus trampas, que no nos permitan trabajar ni dormir." And in English, it's "How scampish their tricks." And
Mhm, mhm,
it's just
mhm.
that's just not quite the
Trampas.
same, right? How scampish the as "Que malas tus
Right,
trampas."
right, right, right.
Like that's more. I think, and then even obviously, in the Spanish version, there's a swear word
Mhm.
that I didn't, use. Just I don't believe in gratuitous
Yeah,
swearing,
yeah.
but there's I don't know if I should even be saying that on this tape, but
Say
there's
it.
the line, I'm talking about drummers,
Yeah.
son chingones con sus tormentas de
Mhm.
platillos, and there's this where when you're calling something chingon, you know,
Yeah. Strong
powerful,
word.
right?
Right.
It's a powerful word.
Right.
And I tried to do it in English by saying they are badasses with
Uh-huh.
their cymbal storms, and it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I think badasses is the best way to
It's
translate
probably
chingon
the
there.
nearest in that context,
But
yeah.
and I hope the archives don't mind me here. But it's not quite
The
the
archive is
same.
blushing.
Yeah, the archives it's not quite the same,
Right, it's not. It's
you
not
know?
quite the same. It's,
And it never will be quite the same, and
yeah.
maybe that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think obviously you're never gonna have a translation be exactly the same as an original, and so they stand as two texts.
Uh-huh.
And what I'll do is, if I have an audience that has a few Latinos in it and a few people and open-minded people and some people who are willing to just listen to a poem for the fun of the sounds, I'll always read the Spanish version.
Uh-huh.
If I'm in a really stuffy audience
Who can imagine such a thing?
who really and I don't know that there's a single Latino in there, then I'll tend to read both versions.
Mhm.
I'll read the Spanish and then I'll read the translation.
Uh-huh,
Mhm.
uh-huh. Yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting though to hear, I can really see it when you point out the difference between some of those lines where it has to do with nuance and with kind of colloquial Spanish
Yeah.
that 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 you really favor the Spanish version. That makes a lot of sense. Um, so let's talk about poets whose work is important to you. We've talked a little bit about your relationship to the visual arts. Let's talk about your relationship to other poetry.
Mm.
Have your favorites changed over time? Are there some who you keep coming back to? Are there some who you feel like I just couldn't write another word if it weren't for so and so
Mhm.
and their work?
I think, my favorites widen over time. I don't
Uh-huh.
know that they
Good.
change.
Uh-huh.
There are poets I keep coming back to, but I think it just, the poetry that I love just gets bigger and bigger and
Mhm.
bigger,
Mhm.
and I don't replace one with the other.
Uh-huh.
I just keep bringing more in,
Yeah, good.
and I would say that, one of my early, well, not early. I mean, if I go early, there isn't a single Latino because early on we were not. I never was given any Latino
Yes.
writers in school, and it wasn't until I was, oh, I'd say toward the end of my undergraduate studies
Mhm.
that I first started to discover any U.S. Latino writer. And one of the first I read was Lorna de Cervantes,
Oh, no
and
kidding.
she's always been a major, major influence on my writing. And I think where you see it is in the image.
Mhm.
I really imagery and poetry. Obviously, every poet works with image, so it sounds so obvious what I'm saying. But what I've heard other people tell me, and I wouldn't say this about myself, but others who've read my work have said to me, "You write what I call deep image poetry."
Mm.
Okay? So I think maybe the image being so central
Mhm.
is, coming from Lorna de Cervantes,
Mhm.
from that being very central in her
Uh-huh.
work, at least
Uh-huh.
in her early work
Yes.
that I was reading at that time, and her work, changes over time, as does most people's work,
That's
and
right.
it gets more and more complex, I think,
Uh-huh.
over time.
Uh-huh.
But she's always been an influence, and also not just as a poet, but as an activist. I mean, I so love and admire the activism that she has been a part of
Yes.
all the years.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, as you know, I just adore Juan Felipe
Juan
Herrera's
Felipe.
work.
Yeah.
I think he is one of the very best top. I mean, top if I had only 10 my 10 fingers, he would definitely be among them.
Uh-huh.
Maybe if I only had 5 fingers, he'd
Yeah.
be among them,
Yeah.
okay? Of not only of Latino poets, but of American poets,
Mm.
period,
Yeah.
okay? Contemporary American poets, I think is one of the very, very, very best.
Mhm.
And what do I love about Juan Felipe Herrera? Very different from Lorna de Cervantes, right?
Very different.
Uh, I love his sense of play, the way of which so often sound and the way one word riffs off of another word or
Yeah.
one image riffs off of another is primary in his work. I love that his work um, makes me read it two, three, four times to try to get a sense of the ideas in it, but then even as I'm doing that, the ideas in it become less important than just the overall kind of impression
Uh-huh.
and visceral sense of, I connect to this and I don't know exactly why. I can't tell you in this really linear way, but I feel this in my gut
Yes.
and I feel this in my heart
Uh-huh.
and I feel this in my whole body almost like a dancer. His
Uh-huh.
poems dance.
Yes.
His poems are like this modern dancer.
Uh-huh.
And the modern dancer is wearing some kind of amazing costuming. So there's all this color and there's all this symmetry, but there's all this movement. His poems move. That's part of it. It's like, I mean, I love all kinds of artwork,
Uh-huh.
but I'm really drawn to in the visual art. I'm drawn to a lot of stuff, but I'm very drawn to like abstract expressionism.
Mm.
And I just love Jackson Pollock.
Yes.
I can
I
sit
do
and look at a
too.
Jackson Pollock painting forever,
Yeah.
and I feel like in some ways Juan Felipe Herrera does that with words.
Uh-huh.
He's just taking words, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
throwing
Putting
them
them
at
at
this
the
canvas
page.
and
Yeah.
drizzling them on this canvas, and um, I just don't see. There are a lot of poets, so many poets, and they're doing so many things.
Mhm.
And there are certainly other poets that are as experimental or way more experimental than
Uh-huh.
Juan Felipe. But I don't know that no one is doing exactly what Juan Felipe does. It's like, um, and I'm not saying that Juan Felipe's poetry is at all like Santana's
Mm,
guitar,
mm.
but the comparison I'm trying to make is you if you hear a Santana song,
Yeah.
you can hear 2 notes, and you know that's Santana's guitar.
Okay.
You can like Santana, you can not like it.
Right.
You can like the old music and not the new music,
Yeah.
okay? But you hear 2 notes, and you know that's Carlos Santana on
That's
that
right.
guitar. It's that distinct. The same thing with Jimi Hendrix's guitar,
Uh-huh.
okay? The same thing with Juan Felipe Herrera.
Uh,
You know, you read his poem,
the way he puts words
yeah,
together. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm just so I go back to his work over and over and over and over. But I mean, those are 2 people that have influenced me for a long time,
Uh-huh.
but there's so many, Maria. I
Yeah.
mean, God, I wouldn't even know where to start. There's so many, and I'm
Yeah.
discovering more and more every day.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I mean, just having done a reading with you and Ura Noel is his
Uh-huh.
last
Uh-huh.
name, and we're going to be doing a reading tonight with Paul Martina.
Yeah.
All three of your work is I'm blown away by it. I love it. I can't wait to get home and read those books. And those this is new stuff that's coming out. These are brand new books.
Yeah, I think
So
there's a fellowship, I
mhm,
think, among these poets,
right,
you and I and Paul and Uda, because we're all we feel like we're kind of, taking hold of this
yeah.
period in literary history together, and that's important, I think.
I mean, and I really like a lot of poets that are not Latinos as well. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like
You're an equal opportunity reader.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many. I love Tim Siebel's work.
Mm,
He's an African American poet who's done several books now. Um, I like oh, there's so many. Now I'm trying to think of this. Lot of Native American poets. I love Joy Harjo.
yeah.
You know, as much of an influence as Lorna D was, so was Joy Harjo.
Uh-huh.
One of the earliest poets that I just fell in love with.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Which book of hers?
all of them.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think maybe in Mad Love and War
Ah,
might
yes.
still be my favorite.
My favorite
I think
too.
that is my favorite.
Yeah.
But I also like in The Woman Who Fell from the Sky, there's that poem about the kitchen table.
Mm.
Oh my God.
Mhm.
And there's so many wonderful poems in there, but that kitchen
Yeah.
table poem,
Yeah.
I have that poem up in my kitchen.
Oh, do you? Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. There's a whole story that goes with that, but it's too long to tell right now. I mean, I love Lee Young Lee's work.
Uh-huh.
You know, I love David Murrah's work.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, I could go on and on and on. And this is what I hate about this being taped because there's all these people whose work I love who I'm not
Yeah.
saying right now because I
Yeah.
just can't think of them off the top
That's
of my
alright,
head.
that's alright, that's alright.
Yeah.
Um, speaking of favorites, I'll share a few of my favorites, in this book, and then I'd like you to tell me which are your couple of favorites,
Mhm.
in here. Obviously, Cornflowers I've mentioned is a favorite because to me it shows that kind of affinity with, other Chicana poets through the reference of corn, through the connection of the woman to the earth, and that's something that Chicana poets are doing again and again. And it's a sweet, mother-daughter kind of
Mhm.
poem. I think you were worried that it was too sweet. As we were
Mhm.
editing the book, you said, "Oh, I'm not too sure, but if you
Mhm.
feel strongly, put it in."
You made me like this poem again.
Well, good.
I mean, and I think we tinkered with it a little
We
bit.
did,
It
we
was
did.
really slight,
Yeah,
but it was enough.
yeah.
Sometimes
Oh,
the
good.
tiniest revision does
That's right.
something.
Yeah, changes the
I
tone.
remember saying to you it was in the middle stanza. There's something I just don't like in that middle stanza, Maria, and I don't know
Mm.
what it is.
Mhm, mhm.
And I don't remember if I know you made the suggestion of the word teosinte, but I don't remember if you made another suggestion or you just gave me some time to think through it. But
Uh-huh.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad you feel better about it
Mhm.
now, and it's definitely one of my favorites, and the first one is one of my favorites. I don't think we maybe changed a thing on that first one on
Mm-mm.
medicine. Again, for me, I'm always looking for those environmental connections, and you do it so beautifully. And you shared with me that that's always been an interest for you.
Mhm.
That's always been a passion for you is connecting to the environment. As you look through the collection, what stands out for you uh,
That's my favorite.
as your favorites, or the few that are maybe most important to you?
Well, my favorite as a poem
Yeah,
is Empty Spaces,
empty
believe it or not.
spaces.
And this is
Good.
interesting because it has probably the least Spanish in it.
I hadn't thought of it
Uh,
that way.
that's not why.
Uh huh.
What I think why I mean, I'm talking only purely as a poem now, as aesthetics, not as, not necessarily for content, or I mean, ideas.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably the most experimental piece I have.
Okay.
And I think I'm so much more interested in experimentation now.
Uh-huh.
This work goes over many years.
Uh.
I've written these poems over a long, long period of time.
Uh-huh.
And I think that this is a newer one. And I'm much more interested in experimentation now than I was before.
Uh-huh.
And this has that. And it's a prose poem, which I haven't done a lot of, and I'm really interested in doing more of.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time that it's kind of more experimental and more in a prose poem, it's also still has that performancy edge
It
to it.
does, absolutely, because of the rhymes that are built into the lines, I think, and the
Maybe.
rhythm that's built in.
And I think part of it is the when it's part of it is just I think the language in it is fresher than in some other ones. Like I don't know, when I came up with that line, she is reeling in a ravenous subjunctive that would doubt its own bones. I said, okay, that's a lot.
Some poetry.
A ravenous subjunctive. You know, I
Uh-huh,
was really
yeah.
excited when I found
Good,
that. Okay.
yeah, that's a poem
So I
right
think that's
there.
one of my favorites. And then I don't know. I am drawn there's a way that I'm drawn to enye and ve
Okay.
too in that language series. And I think part of it is this that sound wave series. Part of it is the same thing again. It's that they're a little bit more they're more lyrical,
Mm,
they're less narrative, and I'm
yeah.
less interested in writing narratives and, they're more lyrical, they're more experimental.
Uh-huh.
They kinda go they force you to come back, reread them a couple times,
That's right,
especially they.
especially the
Uh,
mhm.
um, I again, it's kind of the same reasons. It's some of the lines like, "The jade of stone beasts that pull thieves up the open-legged vertices of our pyramids," that
Mhm.
it's just more it seems more fresh and more original to me maybe
Uh-huh.
than some of the lines and some of the ways in which, words rub up against each other in some other poems, you know?
Yes, right, right.
Uh, I worked really hard on them, maybe that's part of it too.
Yeah.
Um,
Could I request a reading?
sure,
Could you read Empty Spaces? And
sure.
maybe we'll talk a little bit about it and then read Duración B.
Yeah,
We'll talk
sure.
a little bit about it.
Or I can do empty spaces and read one of the ones you like.
Oh, no, I want to
Oh,
hear you reading the
okay.
ones that you love. Yeah.
Okay. Empty spaces. She is a switchblade, afraid of the hint in a 2-second glint that might spring you an arm's length away, I fear. She kisses close to shut the open gate of hunger, heavy footed as history perched on her chest. Empty spaces. She never rests. Stumbling through the clutter of language, she rummages cramped closets for her lost sounds, y griegas y r's tumbling like marbles spilled in the attic. Spaces I fear. She mainlines white noise, a guest persistent as rain, flooding her muted room. Spaces. She adds another hue to the walls, crawling with orange and blue that zigzag the curves of her world to the ceiling. I fear empty spaces. She is reeling in a ravenous subjunctive that would doubt its own bones were it not for her grip slipping from your moist shoulders to the winter of metal bedposts. Spaces I empty. She grinds against you, minding only the bland blue sky that filters through the O'Keefe hollow of her pelvis. I empty fear. In this abyss, she comes, braying the silence away.
That is one of my favorites too. That is one of my
Oh,
favorites
that's
too.
great. Thank you.
And I love what you love about it, that it takes this experimental approach in that we only learn about the she as we move along.
Mm-hmm.
It's bits and pieces that add up to a whole rather than in a more narrative poem, you're clear on who's related to who and how and where you are, but you sort of are on slippery footing in this poem, and it's really compelling in that way.
And then it has the 2 voices, the kind of the voice in italics that's
Yes.
just "I fear," and then empty spaces, and then spaces "I fear," and all those different configurations of that sentence are one
Uh-huh.
voice,
Yes,
and then there's the other voice, which is the rest of the poem.
that's right. And as you say, you have it typeset in italics and it kind of creates a space or a rest in the
Mhm.
rush of the prose, and you
Mhm.
read it as a kind of pause or a sort of,
Mhm.
here's a different mindset, here's a different
Mhm.
voice, and then back into the more forceful prose. And it appears more forceful on the page as well when it's not italicized. So it's interesting that the sound and the visuals can echo each other in that way too.
Mhm.
Okay, let's hear Duración B,
Um,
please.
Duración de. Aquí vuelan aves arracimadas como uvas. Clusters perch over open mouthed stones, the sculpted men arcing back, necks straining toward gods and vines, elbows raised in angles. Birds veil the starved sun. Aquí vuelan aves arracimadas. This is the ave en cabeza de vaca, sweating the salt of the bay in a migration that halts and hovers. Is it the glint of obsidian that lures vultures to the eye of earth? Or jade of stone beasts that pull thieves up the open legged vertices of our pyramids? We vanish. Aquí vuela nave. In the wind worn skull of the longhorn. In mutations making bowls of eye sockets, cups of its keratin, we carve hilts for our bowies from the open jaw. We feed. Muscle is a buzzard's feast, our brazos his power to swarm. The new sounds echo a chamber older than memory. Our bays fling their arms open and come back to us, bays. We have seen balas faster than veins of light etching the night sky. They fill our heads with ringing.
It's funny to say it, hearing it now, because it's so present in the oral reading.
Mhm.
But for some reason, it didn't jump out at me on the page that there are so many, 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 many birds in that poem. It's
Yeah.
full of birds. I remember really loving the line, "Birds veil the starved sun." That's
Mm.
such a beautiful line. But to hear how "Aquí vuelan aves" it becomes a refrain, and how there's buzzards, and then how "our ves" echoes aves, and so it's
Mhm.
sort of full of birds in this
Mhm.
very beautiful way. Um, was that one of those sort of associative, magical poetry? You didn't sit down and say, "Birds and this letter, they're going to go together." Did it sort of spring out of? What did
Well,
it spring out
it
of?
sprang out of this whole series sprang out of studying Spanish linguistics. So see, when you have to take classes like that, there can be a good end.
That's
I
right.
mean,
Good
I was
lesson.
taking a course in Spanish linguistics and phonetics and phonology, which is hard stuff to study no matter what language you're studying it in. And my having not grown up, I mean, my having grown up with both English and Spanish
Yeah,
present, but not having grown up being educated in
yeah,
Spanish,
right.
that's a whole different thing. It's one thing to speak the Spanish of the familia.
Yeah,
It's another thing, formal Spanish,
sure.
right? And so that, of course, was tough.
Yeah.
And yet I was so taken with the ideas,
Ah,
right? And sounds and how they work and what I mean, I can't even remember. I mean, this is a long time ago that I did the course studying that. But that's when I wrote these poems.
uh-huh.
When those kind of ideas about Spanish phonetics were
Yeah,
really in my head.
uh-huh.
And the birds, though, were partly intentional in that I want what I wanted to do in these poems was work with, okay, here's this sound. What images come to our minds when we meditate on this sound? Is there a history in there somewhere?
Mm,
And then beyond that, when the sound gets represented in writing by a letter,
mhm.
what does that letter look like?
Ah,
So the V,
uh-huh.
you automatically think of bird wings and
Yeah,
you think of the V formations that they fly in the
sure.
sky. They always are, they always fly like that. And so the V was, I was working with ve, So that V wasn't the bird was intentional,
Uh-huh.
but it wasn't intentional that he becomes all these kinds of birds.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, that it's
Right,
a buzzard
right.
later, that just
Yeah,
happened.
right.
Why did this poem become about ancient things? Why did cabeza de vaca get in there?
Sure.
Because of VACA,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
right? I mean, that was all very associative.
Yes.
Um, and partly because, again, there's reasons because of the pyramids, it's a V, it's an
Uh-huh,
upside down V shape.
uh-huh,
You look at the glyphs
uh-huh,
on a lot of the stones and
uh-huh.
walls, and you have these very geometrical
Mhm,
kind of shapes
mhm.
sometimes that are triangular.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And so I think that that is what it is that I like about these poems, that they're working on the level of the oral, they're
Uh-huh.
working on the level of the visual.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I don't think a lot of readers realize that.
Mhm, mhm.
That's always what's disappointing to a poet
Right, right, right.
is that you're doing
All the
all these
work you
things.
put into
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And the reader doesn't necessarily think about that, the
Yeah.
way the V looks. Or I did it in Enye too, because Enye has a tilde over it.
Uh-huh.
So there's all these serpentine images. The sound is also serpentine to me because of Enye,
Yeah.
Enye. It
Right.
like
Yeah, yeah.
rolls like a serpent,
It
right?
does. Yeah.
And I think uh, I like these because they're so multi-leveled and layered.
Uh-huh.
But I also know that most readers probably aren't gonna think about all that. Okay.
Maybe not on
So
a first reading, but
yeah.
maybe as they dig in, they would. Well,
Mhm.
thank you for sharing the genesis of those.
Mhm.
Um, we're gonna wrap it up, so thank you so much for
Okay.
sharing your poetry and sharing so many of your thoughts with us.
Well, thank you, Maria. And I feel so blessed to have had the interview with you, being that you edited the book and helped me with the book so much. And I'm really happy to have this at the Institute for Latino Studies. So I'm grateful to the Institute too.
Yes, thank you,
Thanks.
ILS. Thanks for being here, Brenda.
Right.